Hey guys, welcome to this episode of TrueFire's Guitar Shed. I'm your host, Jeff Sheets, and this episode is all about theory and guitar wisdom. I know that doesn't sound real sexy, but we've got 3 really cool lessons set up for you today that I think will give you some great insights. Now, these lessons are taken from full-blown courses available at TrueFire, so if you want to dig deeper and check the whole courses out, then go ahead and click the links below and that will take you there. So our 3 lessons today are presented by 3 TrueFire educators. Number 1, yours truly. Also, we've got Joe Robinson and Chris Bono. So up first, we've got a lesson from my course called Street Theory. Now, to me, street theory just means practical theory, some things and nuggets that you can really use. So this lesson is basically about what are the most important notes of a chord. Now, you may be thinking, well, the root note, that would obviously be the most important note. Maybe not. So check this lesson out where I talk about a couple of other notes that will help you define what chord you're listening to.
What are the most important notes of a chord? When I ask students this, most of them will immediately say, well, obviously the 1, right? The root note. That's the most important note. But let's say we're playing a 7th chord. Which notes are really important in there? If we look at our chart of how 7th chords are built, once again, our 3 families of chords, our major, our minor, and our dominant chords. What do you see there? What we see is the 1, while we think it's important because it names the chord, it's the same in all of those chords. The 5, same thing. So the 5 is going to be the same. But what about the 3rd note and the 7th note? Those are the notes that will define whether a chord is major, dominant, or minor. If it's major, both the 3rd and the 7th will be major intervals. If it's dominant, the 3rd will be major, but the 7th will be flat, or a minor 7th interval. If it is minor, we'll have a flat 3rd and a flat 7th. So we could think about that and say, well, that means that then the 3rd and the 7th will be the only notes that will tell me if something is either major or minor or dominant. Because if we think about the 1 and the 5, if I play the 1 and the 5, right, that's our power chord. That's why guys like to play the power chord a lot, is because it's neither major nor minor. You know, it's certainly not dominant. It's just the 1 and the 5. So it's very versatile, and you can play it. If you don't know whether you should play a major or minor chord, you can certainly play the power chord and you're usually safe. So the most important notes of a chord are the 3rd and the 7th. Now, oftentimes we'll hear these notes referred to as guide tones, right? So with guide tones, what happens is, other notes can sometimes be called guide tones, but because these are so strong, guide tones will help define what the chord is with minimal notes. So if I play a G7, a dominant 7, this is, my flat 7 is here and my 3rd is here. So those would be the guide tones. If I'm playing a blues, this is a really good example of using guide tones. If I play a blues, my next chord would be here, would be my C9, right? My C9 has the 3rd here and the flat 7 here. Just opposite of what they were up here for my G, which was flat 7 and 3. Here it's 3 and flat 7. Those 2 notes are so strong in defining the chord, I could play a whole blues like that by using this for my 1 chord, this for my 4, and then this for my 5. So if I did that, it would basically be, you can hear it. My 1 chord, 4 chord, back to the 1 chord, 5 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord. It's got that feel, right? It sounds like. So why is that something that you should know, that you can sort of peel away some of those other notes? Well, especially if you're playing in a band situation, we don't always want to play all of the notes, right? So we don't want to have it be muddy. Sometimes just playing this is a really cool way to just accentuate your part, you know, and you're still playing the chord. It still sounds like the chord, but it's not getting in the way of everything else. Now, when we're playing those two guide tones off of this chord, for example, a pretty cool thing happens because this shape tends to repeat across strings. So if I lower this down to the octave here, my same guide tones could be here. So that's my third and my flat 7. If I lower this down to here, that's my flat 7, that's my third. So I have those two, or those two, or those two, or these two, because of the way the guitar is tuned, got to go up with that one, or this two. So I could play, I can move that all over the place, that on the 1 chord there, then go to the 4 chord down there. So guide tones are the notes that are sort of the sweet notes that pull your ear in the direction of that chord and make sure you know, oh, that's that chord. It works perfect with that dominant 7th chord, right? Because it really helps us outline that and shows us how to play, once again, the blues with 2 notes, which is pretty cool. So focus on learning about those guide tones and really thinking about when you're playing a chord, what are the important notes of the chord? In the next lesson, we're going to look at that and look at basically how to build up a chord and then how to strip it back down.
In this next lesson, Joe Robinson is going to teach us a little bit about playing with the melodic minor scale. This is a lesson that a lot of players know, but they're not really sure how to use or what it's supposed to sound like. So take a listen with Joe as he shows you what this can do.
Let's talk about some ways to use it when improvising. So the chord that kind of this scale might be played over would be this kind of C minor major 7, so which is like a C minor chord with a major 7 note here, which is the B. And a really, really cool way to use this scale that a lot of great jazz musicians use to cool effect is to play it over like a B altered chord, so like a B7 altered chord. So if you have an altered chord, you can kind of go up a half step and play the melodic minor scale potentially if you're resolving, for example, if the B altered chord is resolving to like E minor. So let's play over this chord progression. We're going to go kind of from this C minor major 7 to an F7 with a sharp 11, which also works over this chord, to a B7 altered chord, and then back to the C minor major 7. So you'll hear this scale has a really beautiful, distinct sound, and it's one of the more commonly used scales in jazz, especially when playing over these altered dominant chords. So that's the C melodic minor scale. You could hear I was doing some little embellishments during that improvisation section, using some slides and some bends, trying to make it kind of sound cool and melodic. I encourage you to just play with the rhythm track, get comfortable playing this scale in these couple different positions that we've dove into it, and it's really a beautiful sound. And the great jazz players like John Scofield, for example, uses this scale to great effect. So listen to some great players and have fun with this one.
In our final lesson in this episode, Chris Bono is going to give us a primer on reading music. If you've always wanted to read music, you know you should probably learn how to read, but you weren't sure where to start, this is a great place to start. So check this lesson out.
The first step we're going to take in learning how to read music is define the elements that we're looking at on paper. And before we do that, let's split music up into the two main parts that it is: pitch and rhythm. Pitch is the sounds, the highness and lowness of those sounds that we're making, whether it's single pitches or multiple pitches, turning into chords, our notes. And the other side of the equation is rhythm. Where are we putting these elements in time? Where are we playing the notes and chords in time? Those two elements have to be represented in the music that we are looking at and that we are reading. Now, the basic elements on the paper, so to speak, that we're looking at while we're reading start at the left side of this horizontal element on the paper. That's called a staff. That staff is made up of 5 lines that creates 4 spaces. To the very left of that, you will always see a clef sign. That clef sign puts the notes on that staff in a certain range. We will always see what's called the treble clef. It's also known as the G clef. Moving over to the right of that, you're going to see 2 elements that define the pitch and the rhythm. They tell you how these things are going to be organized or how we're going to deal with them. Pitch will be left to the key signature. That's telling us, the root center and what notes in that key signature need to either have a certain group of sharps or a certain group of flats or neither, which in this case, throughout this course, you're not going to see anything, even though the key signature is there, but you won't see anything because we're going to be playing everything in the key of C. If you want to interpret it as A minor, go ahead. But either way, we're not going to see anything there, but it's still there. So we are in the key of C. So that's our key signature. So that deals with the pitch. Then you have the time signature. 2 numbers on top of each other all the time. They are telling us how we organize the rhythm of what it is that we are playing. Top number always tells us how many beats per measure. What I mean by that is on the staff, we segment music into sections. Those sections are defined by how many beats that keep going by. That's called a meter. We're going to read in 4/4 throughout the entire course, which means there's going to be 4 beats dedicated to each bar or measure. The top number time signature says 4. Now the bottom number, this one's a little controversial. The bottom number tells us how to interpret the symbols, rhythmically speaking, that we're going to be reading. What numbers are given to those? What values are given to these note symbols that we're going to be learning about? The 4 being on the bottom is very common. 4/4 is the common time signature, so much so that sometimes it could be abbreviated with a C. Instead of seeing 4/4, you may see a C. So that 4 on the bottom, what does it mean? Well, traditionally it's taught that 4 on the bottom tells us that the quarter note receives 1 beat, which is true. But you know what? Here's one way, and you might see me breaking a lot of rules here, or at least traditions, and this is the first one. I like to think of the bottom number of a time signature as telling me how much the whole note is worth. I don't have to decode anything. 4 beats. The other way around makes me have to think about something. It's like a 2-step process. This is direct. Gives you the same stuff. As you'll see, as we go down and learn about these notes and the values that they are, it's all defined. It all starts with that bottom number of the time signature. So it's either the quarter note gets 1 beat or the whole note gets 4 beats. It all gives you the same values. And we'll go over these again as we start getting into the first section of the course. So we have a staff with a clef, 2 signatures, key signature, time signature. There's our pitch and rhythm. And then we have everything that we need to get going, to start. We know how this is going to play out. Now, when I'm referring to beats per measure, that top number of the time signature, those measures or bars are depicted on the staff by vertical lines. So every vertical line you see is creating a bar, and that's where the 4 beats live. A collection of bars going across the staff is called a system. From there, we can get started. We have everything that we need. From left to right, we see our treble clef, our key signature, our time signature, and then we start to see the elements that we're reading. The elements on the left tell us how to read it, and then what we're looking at to the right of that is what we're reading. So we have our notes and our rhythmic values of those notes, and that's exactly where we're going now. So we're going to get started with our first set of notes that we're going to learn, and also our big 3 rhythmic values. Ready? Let's do it.
All right, well, thanks for tuning into this episode. See, all this theory and wisdom wasn't too bad, was it? So there's a lot of cool things. If you really dig into theory the right way, you can find out a lot of things about the instrument that's going to make you a better player. I'm Jeff Sheets. I want you to keep working out in the shed, and I'll see you on the next episode.